Northwest Now is supported, in part, by viewers like you. Thank you.
The winner of the race for Washington's new 10th Congressional District will have less juice than a dead battery. But former State Representative Denny Heck and Pierce County Councilman Dick Muri are going toe-to-toe. We'll hear from both next on this Decision 2012 edition of Northwest Now. The 2010 census gave Washington another seat in the House of Representatives. The new 10th Congressional District was drawn in accordance with Washington's bipartisan redistricting process. And recent disclosures forced by a News Tribune public records request illustrate even more clearly that in the end, all the effort was put into protecting incumbents and divvying up the political pie to suit party politics first and foremost. Now in May, Northwest Now hosted a discussion about the new 10th.
In ours, with only 4, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, we do have to come to a meeting of the minds, and we did, as we did in the 2 previous, after the 2 previous censuses.
Right. There's one more premise, I think. I agree with what the senator just said. But also in a redistricting process, I think the sort of the cardinal rule is do no harm to incumbents. As a matter of fact, if you can.
Well, that's one of the criticisms of the process, yes.
Is you know, and I think they accomplished that. I mean, you know, the incumbents' positions were enhanced in almost every single case.
While it might be argued that disparity was baked into the cake in the 10th District, as it was always intended to go to a Democrat, and Denny Heck specifically, that disparity comes into sharpest relief looking at the fundraising. The latest report from the Center for Responsive Politics shows Heck having raised almost $1.4 million to Dick Muri's $167,000. That money will be spent reaching a Democratic-leaning but still diverse electorate that lives in a district that runs from the Shelton area through Olympia and Thurston County and into Pierce County all the way to Sumner. Dick Muri has served as a Pierce County Councilman since 2003 and had a 22-year military career with the U.S. Air Force, retiring as a lieutenant colonel with stints at McChord and Incirlik, Turkey during Operations Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and Provide Comfort. Muri is pro-life, against same-sex marriage, against the Affordable Care Act, and isn't convinced humans cause climate change. Muri has a master's in public administration from Golden Gate University and has been married for 33 years and has 4 grown children. Anybody who's running as a Republican, the thing people want to know is what, if any, is your relationship with the Tea Party? Are you endorsed by them, or where are you there?
Well, here in this state, the Tea Party is not a major organization. There's people that call themselves the Tea Party. The individuals involved in the Tea Party all support my idea of limited accountable government. That's what I think they're looking for here, but I don't think you see too many Tea Party rallies here in the Puget Sound area that I know of. But
you don't count the Tea Party among your endorsements then? Or?
Well, I would, because the people who, and I'm not sure, but you know, there's people that call themselves the Tea Party Patriots in the South Sound. There are just groups of people that mainly usually Facebook pages, but it really comes down to I don't see any differentiating. You know, you have the Republican Party and you have the Democrat Party, and then you have other constituent groups. I don't know if the Tea Party is a major group factor out there.
One of the big issues you could be facing right out of the chute, if sequestration gets extended by a couple of months into the 113th Congress, you could be sitting right there at the time that a lot of these issues come up for vote. What is your thought about, should you be put in that position as a freshman congressman? Yeah. What are your thoughts about sequestration?
Well, sequestration is a big mistake. That's taken the gallows to the system. You know, it's not right. We should have a budget discussion on each line item and come up with the right number, especially in the Department of Defense. This sequestration is going to just doom the Defense Department to make some practical decisions. They're going to be canceling contracts that are going to cost us more to reopen in the future. Or it's going to require the wholesale laying off of early outs for troops that, you know, have served our country, that we spent a lot of money to get them in. Now they're going to have to be laid off. It doesn't make sense.
When we talk about the Tea Party, we talk about sequestration. That leads me to a more basic philosophical question about Dick Muri, and that is, are you a man of compromise?
I'm a principled conservative. I've worked on the county council for 9 years. I've done a lot of major things that were all 7-0 votes. That means both Republicans and Democrats. I'm all getting back down to principles, and yes, I will compromise. I will compromise for the greater good. But I am also a person that hates waste. That's why being chairman of the Pierce County Performance Audit Committee for the last 6 years has been my love and my dream, to find ways to get government more efficient. I've been on that council for 9 years now doing that.
Another area where entitlements or compromise will certainly come into the discussion involves entitlements, most specifically Social Security, the Affordable Care Act, some of the elements there that fall into entitlement category. What are your thoughts about that going into this election?
Again, especially on what they call affordable care, or even Obama calls now Obamacare, we need to repeal and replace it with something that's bipartisan. And I think Mitt Romney's actually coming up with some great ideas. He says there's parts of it that are good, parts of it that aren't good. And there was a reason that not one Republican voted for it, because there was no compromise on tort reform, on interstate competition, on other areas. Some of the mandates and taxes are unfair. The robbing of Medicare to pay for the system was not fair. I think there's a solution out there, but it has to be a bipartisan solution, and that means give and take on both sides.
Is that solution, when it comes to things like Social Security and Medicare, does that involve higher taxes or fewer benefits? How do you see that coming down?
Well, like Social Security, in fact, Social Security, the biggest mistake we did in Social Security is that back in the 60s when Lyndon Johnson put it in the general fund. It should be like what we do here in Pierce County. We have what's called enterprise funds, and they're separate funds that are managed differently, and what goes in and goes out. Social Security is actually a fairly good system that will go on forever if we just make a few little minor changes to it. One is changing the retirement age slowly over time. We brag about 60 is the new 50 and 50 is the new 40, but then we expect everybody to be able to retire. Well, it was 65, now it's going to be 67. But every 10 years, the life expectancy goes up another year.
Right.
And so the system doesn't work. When it was 1935, when it was formed, 65 was the retirement age, the life expectancy was 63. Today it's 79. So we've added 16 years to the lifespan of people on average, which is good news, and it's going to continue to increase as we get better healthy living. So we need to make changes on the
retirement age,
on the benefit side of that.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Another question for you that you very well might face in the 113th, and that is the extension of the Bush era tax cuts.
Right.
Where do you come down there?
I think the tax rates at the Bush era were the rates that we should keep. They were still pretty high. We're talking about 39% for the max rate down to 35%. But I think the Bush era tax rates that have been now in place for 11 years, we should keep. But what we need to do on tax reform is look at all the exemptions that people are getting, both in corporations and people's, they're finding ways to maybe get away from the tax. So, I will want the same rates that we have right now and to stay in place forever, but I will look for all those exemptions that we have that we'd like to write off on our taxes and change those.
Would you sign Grover Nordquist's anti-tax pledge?
I have.
You have?
I have. But if you read that, it says, not raising taxes, but it also says in there it supports tax reform.
And as a general worldview, in general, does the national government spend too much or tax too little?
It spends too much if you look at the numbers. Historically, for the last 30, 40, 50 years post World War II, Korean War, between 17 and 20% of GDP, gross domestic product, went to the federal government. Today it's at 25%. In fact, Romney made a pledge. He says we think we should get it down to around 20%, which would be the high amount. So that's what we need to set. How much of our net worth, how much of our life energy should go to the federal government? 25% is too much. Historically, it's been between, post-World War II era, between 17 and 20. That's what we should shoot for, and find out how that 20% can be best spent. Part of it's going to go to Social Security, some of it's going to go to Medicare, Medicaid, it's going to go to defense, it's going to go for interest on the debt, and other accoutrements. But we need to find out what that right level is and get the spending down.
In an attempt let our viewership get to know you a little bit, another question about political philosophy are kind of broken down into two different camps as we think about the role of government going forward here when we're talking about sequestration and some of these other questions. Would you describe yourself as a yo-yo, meaning you're on your own, or a wait, W-A-I-T-T, which is we're all in this together?
We're all in this together. We are. When I served on the Steilacoom School Board, or my years in the military to my 9 years in the council, we're all a team. We're all a country. We're all trying to help each other, and we do need a safety net. But at some point, when does that safety net become, too much? I was looking at a graph that said in 1964, $9 billion went to entitlements like food stamps and all that. Now it's $900 billion. We've gone up 100-fold, 10,000% in 40 years. It's almost been a straight line. There's been a few bumps in the road where it flattened out. But at what point are these entitlements gonna get to the point where we can't afford it? We just can't afford to give people everything they want or desire.
How would you make an impact as the junior delegate from, in the congressional delegation from Washington State, a far-flung western state in a new congressional district? I mean, you're obviously going to go into Congress, without a lot of juice.
But I'm also going to go into Congress without a lot of accoutrements. If you look at who's funding my campaign, it's friends and family in the local area. It's not like my opponent Denny Heck, who's got all these PACs and all these unions and all these special interest groups from Boston and New York and all that funding him. I'm going to go in there without any accoutrements. I'm going to go in there and be able to say no to people on the right, people on the left. No, you can't have this money, you can't have this tax break, you can't have this special program. It comes down to 40% of our federal budget is being borrowed. Even 10% would be too much. We have a huge gap between what people expect and what they're willing to pay for. And everybody is going to have to take a haircut. And that's going to be tough to tell everybody. Everybody needs to take a haircut.
What would people be surprised to learn about Dick Muri that they don't know?
That I'm a true environmentalist. My degree is in environmental health. I'm a recycling nut. I recycle everything, and I want other people to do that. I believe there's a place for everything and everything in its place. I believe in true environmental causes are good, with the preservation of habitat that we pay for, by the way. We don't take through a government edict. But one of the reasons I live here in the Puget Sound versus back on the East Coast, where I'm originally from the Boston area, is I love the environment. I love the environment here. I like to keep water clean. I like to keep the air clean. I like to preserve as much habitat as possible. So I'm one of these environmentalists who, with a degree in environmental science, actually likes to do things based on best available science. I think, and the people in the environmental community around the 10th Congressional District know that, and I have surprisingly a lot of bipartisan support.
KBTC Public Television is an active member of the community, spreading awareness, celebrating diversity, and illuminating the paths of social discourse and growth. Join the conversation. Email your comments and suggestions to northwestnow@kbtc.org. You can also submit your story ideas by clicking on the link at the bottom of the Northwest Now webpage at www.kbtc.org. KBTC can be found on Facebook by simply searching KBTC. Get inside information about upcoming programs, post your comments, and connect with other viewers and resources relating to our program's topics. Follow @KBTC TV on Twitter, where you can receive notifications about what we're working on right now, what to look for, and connect with other viewers and linking resources on the topics in which you're interested. KBTC is your public TV station, and we want to hear from you.
Denny Heck co-owns a business with 300 employees and was an original investor in Real Networks. Heck served in Washington's House of Representatives, rising to majority leader, and was then chief of staff during Governor Booth Gardner's second term, and then went out to co-found TVW. Heck is pro-choice, for same-sex marriage, for the Affordable Care Act, and believes in a human connection to climate change. Heck is a graduate of the Evergreen State College and has been married for 36 years with 2 grown children. Denny, welcome to Northwest Now.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate being able to be here.
How do you counter the rap that's out there against you, which is political insider, crony capitalist, connected. That's what the Muri campaign is talking about.
I haven't been a member of the state legislature in more than a quarter century. I haven't been a public employee in more than 20 years. I've been in the private sector, starting, growing, building businesses for the last very many years. In fact, there's only one candidate in this race who has substantial small business experience and has been a member of the private sector, and that's me.
Denny, your opponent, Dick Muri, talks about your endorsements from labor unions and a very connected East Coast bias in fundraising, in which you do have a substantial lead. So is that valid in this day of being the outsider? How do you position yourself that way in the 10th?
Well, look, the reality is it takes money to run, and nobody would dispute that. And I am proud of the fact that we have received donations, Tom, from nearly 3,200 individuals, more than 90% of whom are in Washington State, more than 90%. I would love to know the documented figure on how many people my opponent has been able to persuade to invest in his candidacy. But at the end of the day, let me tell you what I think is a very real threat to our democracy, and that's the emergence of super PACs. I've signed a pledge to keep super PACs out of Washington State and out of the 10th Congressional District, which the last time I checked, my opponent refused to embrace.
Well, the counter there is that's because you're a rich guy.
Well, the counter there is that super PACs are anonymous and they're unlimited and they're toxic to democracy. And if you believe super PACs are bad for democracy, then you should oppose them, period.
Let's get to some issues now. We're looking at the fiscal cliff coming up here in sequestration. I think there's a fairly good chance that this is going to get kicked down the road into the 113th Congress. Should you arrive in Congress to take a look at this issue, where are you on sequestration? Where are you on the fiscal cliff?
Well, first of all, let's be very clear about what this would mean. The Congressional Budget Office has said inarguably that if we go over that fiscal cliff, which is the combination of a bunch of tax cuts expiring and expenditure reductions, both on the defense side and on the discretionary side, then we will inarguably, inevitably be in another recession and unemployment rate will go up. We cannot allow that to happen. There's been enough price paid by middle-class Americans already for what this economy has gone through. But here's the situation. We're not going to cut our way out of this circumstance. We're not going to tax our way out of this circumstance. And we're not going to grow our way out of this circumstance. We're going to have to do all three in order for us to both control the deficit beast and keep this economy from faltering even more.
Which leads me to a question about your political philosophy, and we're going to do several of these. I'm going to mention the C word, and that C word is compromise. Are you a man of compromise?
I think that Americans feel in their stomachs and in their hearts a great revulsion for what's going on in Congress. They have a phenomenally low job approval rating. I like to tell people that they have a job approval rating that is less than half of what Dick Nixon's was when he was forced to resign. And frankly, I think they've earned it. There is entirely too much I win, you lose being played. It's all about I win, you lose. And what it ought to be about is we win. Now, Tom, I actually have history in this regard. When I started TVW, which you kindly referred to at the top of the program, as somebody who had been a partisan Democrat, Chief of Staff to Governor Gardner, and Majority Leader of the legislature, I knew that I would need Republican support. So what did I do? I reached out, I called, and I asked the former conservative Republican Majority Leader of the State Senate, Jeanette Hayner, to come on to the TVW Board of Directors, in fact, to chair it. Because I knew that even though we had different philosophies, we did agree on the cause of open government and transparency. So working across party aisles is how you often get the important things done.
Also part of the debate on sequestration and some of these other very fundamental questions that are going to be coming up in front of Congress. A fundamental philosophical question for you as well. In your mind, does the government spend too much or tax too little?
Well, look, President Clinton just wrote a great book last spring called Back to Work. And it's got a line in it that I love, and it is as follows. There is no evidence to support the idea that America can succeed in the 21st century with an anti-government strategy. That's the reality. If you look around the world in this increasingly global economy, the other nations with whom we're now competing, their governments and their private sectors work together to move the nation forward, and we have to do that. Look, I'm from the private sector, and I'll tell you that over the long term, the engine of growth is the private sector, but the government has an important partnership role to play in places where it can spend money that will improve our economy and improve private sector development. And I hope we get a chance to talk about a couple of them.
Would you sign Grover Nordquist's anti-tax pledge?
Tom, I won't outsource my conscience to anyone.
Bush tax cuts. This also relates, should they expire? Should they stay in place? What are your thoughts about those fiscally?
They should expire for the highest income individuals. And the reason for that is, on the one hand, the middle class has had its income stagnant for 30 years, and in fact decline over the last 10 years. They've already paid a substantial share toward this circumstance. But those among us who have the highest incomes, I believe, can afford to pay a slightly higher rate in order to help tame the budget deficit beast.
You've talked about balancing cuts, revenue enhancement, and growth. Those relate very specifically to entitlement programs, the Affordable Care Act, Social Security, Medicare. This balanced approach that you lay out, how does that fit into our dealing with these entitlement programs that are heading off the edge if you listen to the Congressional Budget Office?
Be more specific, Tom. I'm not sure what.
Social Security. Yeah. Do you envision something like extension of the retirement age, or reduction in benefits, and increase in taxes? I guess I'm trying to feel you out for a little bit for some of these programs that are definitely where there's a horizon, a time horizon here for getting them fixed.
Right. I believe entitlement programs will have to be changed over time. I'm really uncomfortable with this idea of increasing the age, and I'll tell you why. My dad was a truck driver. And I represent a district that's got, for example, a lot of people who work in the mill in Shelton and work in the woods. The prospect that they could work until they're 68 or 69 before they can retire just isn't feasible. It's not reasonable. But there are changes that will have to be made in order to keep these programs strong and preserve them for future generations. Medicare and Social Security are the two pillars of a strong, growing middle class, and we need to keep them. And I am opposed to ending the Medicare guarantee. I am opposed to creating a voucher program out of it. I am opposed to increasing cost, as a voucher program would do, by up to $500 plus per month on our senior citizens.
So where might the revenues come from then to support these programs? Is there any revenue enhancement that you see coming down the pike? Or?
Well, they're two different subjects. Medicare and Social Security are very different. With respect to Social Security, we have a cap on the amount of income that is taxed.
Right.
And the fact is, if you go back to the deal that President Reagan and Speaker O'Neill cut to preserve and lengthen the life of Social Security, we're not keeping faith with the promise that they made in that compromise with respect to that cap. It hasn't kept pace with it. So there's a revenue option.
Laying there.
Yes, absolutely.
You're going to be, if elected to Congress, coming out of a new congressional district, and I know people living around here have a hard time fathoming this, but from what most people perceive to be a far-flung western state, how do you go to Washington and make an impact?
Well, Tom, look, there are 435 congressional districts in America. And in every single district, every single candidate looks their voters in the eye and says, elect me so I can go be effective on your behalf. Every single one.
Or give them heck.
Or give Congress heck. Thank you, Tom. But I would simply invite people to look at my track record. I'm somebody who started a business with 2 employees 11 years ago, and we've grown it to more than 300. I'm somebody that, with my friend Stan Marshburn, co-founded and built TVW, the statewide public affairs network, out of scratch, out of whole cloth. I'm someone that was the majority leader of the State House, and many, many years ago, actually, the principal architect of our state's original Basic Education Act. Don't take my word for it. Look at what I've done.
What would people be surprised to learn about Denny Heck?
Surprised. What wouldn't they be? They might be surprised to learn that I once wrote and performed a one-person play about Washington State's history and the events that shaped it. My wife Paula and I co-produced it. We performed it at the Act Theater in Seattle, in Tacoma, and Olympia, in Vancouver, even actually in Oregon. But they'd probably be more pleasantly surprised to hear why we did that. We gave all the money away. In fact, Paula and I, she, by the way, is a retired middle school principal, started the Olympia Principal's Emergency Checkbook Fund to help low-income kids. It's one of my proudest accomplishments, frankly.
Voters in the new 10th Congressional District will have a chance to make a little history in the upcoming election. The bottom line, no matter who wins the seat, that person will be entering a high-stakes battle over the budget that could make the votes cast even by bit players from a new district in a remote state pretty darned important. I hope this program got you talking and thinking. To watch this program again or to share it with others, it streams on our website at www.kbtc.org. That's going to do it for this edition of Northwest Now. Until next time, I'm Tom Layson. Thanks for watching.